The Middle East, a region perpetually on edge, is a tinderbox where ancient grievances and modern-day conflicts collide. The recent escalation of violence between Israel and Hamas has once again thrust the region into the global spotlight, forcing world leaders, particularly President Biden, into a delicate balancing act. The United States, a steadfast ally of Israel, finds itself walking a tightrope, supporting its allies' right to defend itself while grappling with the escalating humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The situation is complex, fraught with historical baggage, and demands a nuanced understanding of the region's intricate dynamics. Biden's approach to this crisis has been marked by a cautious dance between condemnation and understanding, a reflection of the complex realities on the ground. He has condemned Hamas's rocket attacks on Israeli civilians while also urging Israel to exercise restraint in its military operations. This measured response, however, has drawn criticism from both sides of the aisle, with some accusing him of not doing enough to support Israel, and others arguing that he is not doing enough to protect Palestinian civilians. At the heart of this diplomatic tightrope walk lies the concept of a red line, a term that has become synonymous with U.S. foreign policy. It represents a threshold, a point of no return that, once crossed, will trigger a specific response. In the context of the current conflict, Biden's red line is believed to revolve around the potential for a ground invasion of Gaza by Israeli forces. Such a move, many fear, would lead to a catastrophic escalation of violence with far-reaching consequences. The world watches with bated breath as the situation unfolds, the specter of a wider conflict looming large. The stakes are incredibly high, and the consequences of missteps could be dire. Biden's challenge is to navigate this treacherous landscape, to uphold American values, protect American interests, and hopefully contribute to a lasting peace in this troubled region. His success or failure in doing so will undoubtedly shape his legacy and have profound implications for the Middle East and the world for years to come. The concept of a red line in international diplomacy is a potent one, often fraught with ambiguity and open to interpretation. In the context of the current crisis in the Middle East, Biden's red line, though not explicitly defined, is widely perceived to be centered around a potential ground invasion of Gaza by Israeli forces. The administration has repeatedly stressed the importance of avoiding civilian casualties and has urged restraint in Israel's military operations, but it has stopped short of issuing any ultimatums. This calculated ambiguity is a hallmark of Biden's foreign policy approach, a departure from the more assertive and often unilateral stance of his predecessor. It is a strategy designed to provide the administration with flexibility, allowing it to calibrate its response based on the evolving situation on the ground. However, this approach also carries risks. Critics argue that it could be perceived as weakness by both sides, potentially emboldening Hamas and limiting the administration's leverage over Israel. Furthermore, the absence of a clearly defined red line creates uncertainty, both domestically and internationally. Allies are left to decipher the administration's intentions, potentially leading to miscalculations and misinterpretations. Domestically, it fuels criticism from both sides of the political spectrum, with some demanding a more forceful response and others urging greater pressure on Israel to exercise restraint. Despite the criticisms, the Biden administration maintains that its approach is the most prudent course of action in a highly volatile situation. They argue that a more confrontational approach could backfire, leading to an escalation of violence and undermining the prospects for a negotiated solution. The administration's focus, they say, is on quiet diplomacy, working behind the scenes to de-escalate the conflict and create the conditions for a ceasefire. The current crisis in the Middle East is but the latest chapter in a long and tangled history of U.S. involvement in the region. From the Camp David Accords to the Oslo peace process, the United States has played a pivotal role in shaping the contours of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This legacy, however, is a mixed bag, marked by both successes and failures, triumphs and tragedies. The United States' unwavering support for Israel, a cornerstone of its Middle East policy for decades, has been a source of both praise and condemnation. While many view it as a testament to the special relationship between the two countries, others argue that it has emboldened Israel and undermined the pursuit of a just and lasting peace. This unwavering support has also strained relations with Arab nations and fueled anti-American sentiment in parts of the Muslim world. Moreover, the United States' own interventions in the region, often driven by strategic interests rather than humanitarian concerns, have further complicated the situation. The Iraq War in particular cast a long shadow over the region, destabilizing the balance of power and creating a vacuum that allowed extremist groups like ISIS to flourish. As the Biden administration grapples with the current crisis, it does so with the weight of this history on its shoulders. The ghosts of past interventions, both successful and disastrous, serve as a stark reminder of the complexities of the region and the high stakes involved. The challenge for Biden is to learn from the mistakes of the past while charting a new course, one that prioritizes diplomacy, addresses the root causes of the conflict, and ultimately contributes to a more peaceful and stable Middle East. The world reacts. A chorus of condemnation and support. The recent escalation of violence in the Middle East has reverberated across the globe, eliciting a chorus of condemnation and support from the international community. Governments, organizations, and individuals have voiced their concerns, urging restraint, calling for a ceasefire, and offering humanitarian assistance. The response, however, has been far from unified, reflecting the complex geopolitical realities and the deeply entrenched divisions over the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The United Nations Security Council, the primary body responsible for maintaining international peace and security, has found itself deadlocked, unable to issue a joint statement condemning the violence. The United States, a permanent member of the Council, has repeatedly blocked resolutions critical of Israel, arguing that they are counterproductive and undermine the prospects for a negotiated solution. This stance has drawn sharp criticism from many member states, who accuse the U.S. of shielding Israel from accountability and hindering the Council's ability to fulfill its mandate. Meanwhile, regional powers have also weighed in on the crisis, reflecting their own strategic interests and historical allegiances. Turkey, once a close ally of Israel, has emerged as a vocal critic of its policies, condemning the violence in Gaza and calling for an end to the Israeli blockade. Iran, Israel's arch-nemesis, has used the opportunity to bolster its support for Hamas, providing both rhetorical and material assistance. Public opinion, too, has been sharply divided, with protests erupting in cities around the world. Demonstrations in support of both Palestinians and Israelis have taken place, often marked by heightened emotions and calls for boycotts and sanctions. Social media has become a battleground of narratives, with both sides using the platform to disseminate information, mobilize support, and shape the global perception of the conflict. Charting the course, navigating the uncertain waters ahead. As the violence in the Middle East shows no signs of abating, the international community grapples with the question of how to de-escalate the situation and prevent further bloodshed. The path forward is fraught with uncertainty, complicated by the long-standing grievances, the lack of trust between the parties, and the volatile regional dynamics. The Biden administration, facing mounting pressure both domestically and internationally, is under intense scrutiny as it navigates this complex landscape. Its efforts to broker a ceasefire have so far yielded limited results, highlighting the challenges of mediating a conflict with such deep roots. The administration's approach, characterized by quiet diplomacy and a reluctance to publicly pressure Israel, has drawn criticism from those who believe a more assertive stance is necessary. The role of regional actors will also be crucial in shaping the trajectory of the conflict. Egypt, which has played a key role in mediating previous ceasefires, has been actively engaged in diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the situation. Jordan, home to a large Palestinian population, has also been vocal in its calls for restraint and a return to negotiations. Ultimately, a lasting solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict will require a fundamental shift in the dynamics on the ground. This includes addressing the root causes of the conflict, such as the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories, the expansion of Israeli settlements, and the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza. It also requires rebuilding trust between the parties, a daunting task given the decades of mistrust and animosity. A legacy defined, the long-term implications of Biden's red line. The current crisis in the Middle East will undoubtedly leave an enduring mark on the Biden presidency, shaping its legacy in the realm of foreign policy and its standing on the global stage. The administration's handling of the conflict, particularly its response to Israel's military actions, will have far-reaching consequences, influencing U.S. relations in the region and beyond. The concept of a red line, a defining feature of U.S. foreign policy in recent years, has been put to the test in the crucible of this conflict. Biden's decision to draw a line in the sand, albeit an ambiguous one, regarding a potential ground invasion of Gaza, has signaled a departure from the more hands-off approach of his predecessor. The effectiveness of this strategy, however, remains to be seen, as does its impact on future U.S. interventions abroad. Moreover, the crisis has exposed the limitations of U.S. influence in a region grappling with deep-seated historical grievances, shifting alliances, and the rise of new power brokers. The Biden administration's efforts to rally international support for its position have been met with mixed results, highlighting the challenges of forging a united front in a multipolar world. The long-term implications of this crisis extend beyond the immediate region. The conflict has fueled anti-American sentiment in parts of the Muslim world, potentially complicating U.S. counterterrorism efforts and undermining its soft power. It has also strained relations with key European allies, some of whom have criticized the U.S. response as being too lenient on Israel. In the aftermath of this crisis, the Biden administration will need to carefully assess its approach to the Middle East, balancing its commitment to Israel's security with the need to address the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people. Failure to do so will only perpetuate the cycle of violence and instability that has plagued the region for far too long.